When was the last time you thought about 2xKO? Was it during the budget cuts? That's what most people say. I still find it wild when people say they don't know this game came out. So yes, 2xKO, one of Riot's games that is seemingly meeting the same end as Legends of Runeterra. In the same fate, things started going big at the beginning, then things didn't land the way Riot hoped, and now the game is in the process of figuring out where it wants to stay. Or if and how it can stay. Well, interestingly enough, Riot just teased that one possible future of 2xKO might lie in Teamfight. A new fuse that allows two players to play at the same time. Which sounds confusing, so we should take a step back and look at how Riot got here. So, when 2xKO originally came out, it was set to bring in the casual audience. Funnily enough, in a way, that's what Valorant did too. Against the odds, while the casual FPS audience has always been intimidated by Counter-Strike, Valorant somehow pulled off a nice bridge for all the Fortnite kids. And here, 2xKO was supposed to do a similar thing. One way they wanted to do this was through simplified controls. In this game, it's really just pressing a button and pressing a direction to pull off a move. No fancy twirling with sticks and no complex inputs. Honestly, as a new guy in this space, I have to admit, this was pretty approachable. And that is where the approachability kinda ends. Because while the idea of 2xKO being a 2v2 game was nice, in reality it meant that as a solo player you had to learn two champions at once, while you were supposed to be learning one champion. And yes, I know, there is the fuse that only allows you to play one champion at a time, but that is not exactly something you should be forcing onto players while you are onboarding them. I mean, imagine you are a new fighting game player and you hop into 2xKO. So, what do? Do you A, skip the tutorial and try playing the game? Or B, you realize there are no casual game modes and so you are forced into PvP? Or C, you dive straight into PvP and you get your butt kicked? Or D, all of the above? You know the answer very well. So yes, if there is one place where 2xKO really failed, it was the onboarding experience. Because really, unlike a simple campaign mode that you can find in fighting games that are decades old, which would go crazy here with a little bit of story because people love the League of Legends universe, no, 2xKO doesn't really have anything. You have to brute force your way through PvP, or you have to go into the training mode, which nobody wants to do. But here you might be saying, well, isn't that exactly what Valorant is doing? You either hop straight into PvP, or you spend a lot of time at the range. And well, the difference is that Valorant is not a 1v1 game. There is an entire team, which means that if you fail miserably, just like how it happens in League, there is the chance you might get carried, which saves your mental state. In 2xKO, you just get juggled for 12 seconds by Yasuo or Echo and you're done with the game. And unfortunately, this is not something I just made up. It turns out the players really didn't like the onboarding experience. That is what made a lot of the players leave. And since this is a free live service game, you need a lot of people to be playing the game, so you get people buying skins. Speaking of which, what also didn't help is that the skins were quite expensive. Which is exactly like how it's in Valorant. But does all of this mean that this game is just a steaming pile of ash? Well, not exactly, because you see, it is obvious that this game was made by fighting game veterans for fighting game veterans, with the idea that it would be nice to have new players just sitting there. So in the hands of the fighting game community, this game does well. It totally lives on in its own hardcore bubble. However, without the appeal of the mass audiences, the inevitable had to arrive. And so, a few months ago, Riot made the announcement that the 2xKO team would be shrinking, and as much as it sucks, it totally makes sense. If you don't have the players, you don't sell the skins, you don't have the money to run the game. And that is exactly how 2xKO landed in the spot where Legends of Runeterra was. You see, both of these games have one big disadvantage. They are, in reality, incredibly niche games. If someone is a fighting game fan specifically, they play fighting games and so they might like 2xKO. However, if they are already a big fan of fighting games, there is a good chance they have their own comfort game that they are playing. Which means converting them into 2xKO is gonna be hard because of the sank cost. And the same deal happened with Legends of Runeterra. It was an excellent PvP card game. But the people who played card games already had other card games that they played, and especially in card games, you have to sink in money, so the sunk cost is there. But Riot knew this, and so they fought against this by making the game very cheap. And then they didn't make money. On top of this, because it is a card game, the initial momentum was there, but eventually the casual audience went away. But the twist is that eventually Legends of Runeterra found a new ground. And that of course was the PvE experience called Path of Champions. Which, even though people keep ignoring this for some reason, was far more popular than the PvP side of the game. Which is why PvP was eventually cut. It is not because Riot hated the PvP experience and it wasn't profitable, but it's because people simply didn't play it. And by a pure miracle, this is where a big conversation once again popped up right after EVO, which is where 2xKO shined again. And the conversation popped up with the good old phrase of, if only Riot Games advertised the game more. It's a massive shame that there is clearly a passion for the game, but no one thought it would be a good idea to add a page to the actual League client with play your favorite characters in the new fighting game. Instead, they just left a tiny little icon where they know most League players will just gravitate to League logo, without a second thought. Really sad to think how many misses 2X had besides just the ass name and terrible roster. I'm gonna be honest, I kinda forgot about the name. But yes, this person is totally right about one thing. And we'll talk about the roster later. But first, let's talk about the idea of Riot putting another button in the League client. You see, Riot actually proved many times before that those extra buttons don't do much. When Legends of Runeterra got their own button inside the League client as a gesture of goodwill, it was reported that the button did start some movement, but ultimately it didn't achieve much. But let's also not forget about Riot Forge. Their games were heavily advertised in the client and they still didn't do that well because all of those were niche games. They were aimed at totally different audiences from the MOBA. And that is exactly the point. Let's imagine a scenario where you go to the Counter-Strike player base and you tell them, hey, a new Tekken came out. How many of them will actually play it? The answer is not a lot, because you don't cross those bridges like that. And so unfortunately, advertising a game that is simply not for the mass appeal does exactly nothing. Which is why, eventually, Riot stopped doing it. And also, the roster is not great. So, for a fighting game, we expected beasts and monsters and fighters that actually fight. And really anything that's not just a human after human. But instead of that, we got a 2x Arcane. Yes, it is hilarious to see how it was obvious that Riot was trying to ride off of the hype of Arcane. I mean, all the initial reveals, pretty good. But even the starting champions didn't exactly have the hype, because the variety wasn't exactly there. I remember people questioning it at launch. On top of this, people questioned how we got Jinx and Echo, which is fine, but after that we got Vi revealed, another Arcane character. Again, people were expecting stuff like Trundle, or Zed, or Sett, who is an actual fighter. But thankfully after that we got Blitzcrank, and when Blitzcrank was revealed, ooh, that one brought in a lot of hype. But again, it was still a built-over and zone champion. So finally, then there was Teemo, and Teemo once again resurrected quite a bit of the hype. I mean, it was finally a different character from just a human. But after that we got Warwick, another Arcane character, and then we got Caitlyn. And that's where people lost it. Yes, something in the community died that day. But after that, something interesting happened. Akali was revealed, and her trailer started pulling off numbers. Now remember that Akali was revealed after the announcement of the 2xKO team shrinking down. So people were already doomsaying, so to then see a character that actually looks cool and is actually appealing and is actually fighting, well, that brought people quite the hope. But would that be enough to resurrect the game? Of course not. In order for that to happen, 2xKO would actually need some kind of a big gameplay update, not just a new champion. I mean, we're in the exact same situation as League was quite a time ago. New champions don't exactly mean new gameplay, especially in a fighting game where the gameplay might be very repetitive. But that's where we got a new announcement only a few days ago. One that actually focused on new gameplay. Because Riot revealed there would be a new fuse in the game, which allowed 2 players to play at the same time on the same team for 7 seconds. Now, is this gonna be the big game-breaking change? Well, not really, but as it was mentioned in the reveal, Riot heard that people actually enjoy playing 2xKO as duos. And so they wanted to try a new fuse that would let people do exactly that. Play at the same time. And that is what begs the question. What if Riot tried and turned this into a limited game mode? What if you let people play at the same time the entire time and just see what happens? I mean, this is the exact same kind of experimentation that led to Legends of Runeterra finding a new success. They just tried whatever they could and they essentially made a separate game. And right now, it seems like 2xKO might be trying to do the same thing. I mean, they need something to happen in order to keep going. And I don't think it's gonna be new champions that are gonna bring back the masses. Also, you need to fundamentally change the onboarding experience. Because what doesn't help with that is that the reputation went down so much that people are now focusing on the smaller things. And so, after all the budget cuts, yes, the animation for the new fuse is quite hilarious.